Martin, great to get you on today. I think when we look at the situation right now, we have surging COVID cases in the United States. There's a brand new variant to be worried about as well. Consumer confidence stateside just crashed to a 6-month low. Jay Powell let doves fly at Jackson Hole. Inflation clearly a concern, but investor sentiment remains elevated. What's going on out there? How sustainable is this?
Yeah, well, nice to speak with you, Dan. I think you made a lot of very good points there, very accurate. And I think rightly you wrap things up with a comment about sentiment, because there are things to be concerned about today, and yet the market seems to brush them off. And I think that gives you a good sense of how investors are feeling. They're feeling very positive about most any news that comes out. I mean, you could argue that a lot of the economic data from the US globally has actually been fairly disappointing here. And yet, no matter how the data comes in, there seems to be a silver lining for it for investors. And I think that's a statement about how investors are feeling about the market. They're prone to find the good things, not the bad things in most any news these days. That's very typical late cycle behavior. And so what I think you're seeing is growing investor enthusiasm for owning equities, which is typically what you see at this point in a market cycle.
And it's interesting because everyone I've spoken to this week on this program says stay invested, stay invested. Back to the original question though, how sustainable do you think these gains are? And are we due for perhaps a pullback of some kind, some kind of correction maybe in the month of September or in October? We would have gone a full 12 months without a 5% pullback if we sustain momentum through the month of September.
Well, Dan, you're absolutely right. The market has been just unbelievably steady here. And I hear time and time again that a correction must be overdue, which actually leads me to believe, I think, that maybe we won't get a correction here anytime soon because too many people are looking for it. There seems to be just too many investors on the sidelines waiting to buy the dip when you do get a downturn. But I would argue corrections like that, they're impossible to predict. We could get one at any time for any reason. And yet nothing seemed to disrupt the market at this point. But to your question about how sustainable is this rally, I think it is sustainable. I don't think we're at levels or investor sentiment, despite the optimism that I noted, that looks like you've got a huge detachment between sentiment and reality. It is indeed true that the economic backdrop, although it's been a bit disappointing here, still remains very solid. Certainly there's a lot of accommodation going on, both fiscally and from a monetary standpoint. And I think that leads to this bull market continuing, at least for the time being. Now, I'm not in the camp of folks that believes that just because we went through a technical bear market last year, that we're in the early stages of a new cycle that could last 5, 10, 15 years. I think we are in the late stages of the cycle, but we're not at the very end. And so I think this bull market can continue through the end of the year, maybe with a bit of volatility to your point, maybe even into 2022, possibly 2023. But I think we're closer to the end than the beginning.